Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney Podcast, the official podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. This is episode 94, Jerry Rees and Cranium Command. Now, this was a interview we did with Jerry probably about 2 years ago now, and we found it in our archives and wanted to release it to everybody. So here we go with episode 94, Cranium Command.
I know many of you out there have been waiting for this intently. It is something that's loved and beloved across all of the Diz Twitter, and all of our fans have been asking us so much to do Cranium Command and talk about Buzzy and the film and all that. It is a fan favorite. It is a attraction that I remember, and it was really exciting because one of the two new add-ons to Epcot that weren't there from opening day. But how we've gone undercover here and made some phone calls, and we're bringing back one of our special guests that made an appearance at Retro Magic. So I'll let you do the honors in introducing him and also set the stage about Cranium Command. And if we don't reference Martin Short and what was the movie, Brian?
Inner Space.
Inner Space tonight. So I'm sure that will come up at some point as well. But over to you.
Sure. So, everything Todd said, this was, I think, one of the most Disney of the attractions at Epcot. Certainly one of the most fun and intriguing, and just such a great experience. And tonight we are honored to be joined by Mr. Jerry Rees, the director of Cranium Command. And he's going to talk to us a little bit of how he got involved with the project, and of course, just what it is and what it meant to him. And you're in for a treat because he's such a great guy, so fascinating, so human. And talking to him at Retro Magic and some of the other chances, on and off stage, really gave me a whole new appreciation for the attraction. So please welcome Mr. Jerry Rees.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an introduction. Thank you, Hal.
Great to have you back, Jerry. It feels like just yesterday we were talking to you. So
yes. Oh, and I so appreciated being welcomed by your whole team there for the Retro Magic event. That was just awesome.
Everybody was jealous of your microphone setup at Retro Magic.
Oh, yeah, that's true. In fact, we had a number of people come over to say, "You see him up there? That's what I want next time." Okay,
trend.
So
yeah, exactly. Thanks for agreeing to that.
We're going all wireless next time.
Well, I so am using my hands to gesture all the time, and I knew if I had a mic, it would be like soft, loud, soft, loud. So.
My favorite part is as soon as Jerry got off stage, there was a line of people like it was the Maharishi, like waiting to get their blessing from him and share their stories with him.
That's right. So where do we want to start?
So I guess we should start maybe with just like the sort of the quick overview of what the attraction was, and kind of with the idea behind it. So on our last episode, we talked about how in the early plans for the Life and Health Pavilion, there was an attraction that was going to be called the Head Trip. That was one of the names, and then I think there was a later version that we saw where it was called Brain Command. But there was a
Cranium Commandos was one that I heard too. Wow. In the early days.
So there was this idea of mental health being important. That was one of the sort of the 8 fundamental things that they identified early on that they wanted to talk to people about, and that's what really this attraction was. It was an attraction about mental health, which now is very timely, but I think back then people kind of rarely discussed Outside of people that saw psychiatrists and a few jokes on television about seeing you shrink, mental health really wasn't something that I believe was openly discussed in society in the 70s and 80s. So this was actually kind of a groundbreaking idea to take this to a theme park audience and sort of tell people, no, this is an important thing. You need to take care of yourself in this way too. So the attraction, kind of started and stopped, and there were some earlier versions that got kicked off. It was given to a company called Colossal Pictures to work on, and I don't know, Jerry, if was it just WDI was busy because there were Disney MGM and Pleasure Island, there were just so many projects going on, or did you ever hear why they farmed it out partially?
I'm not sure, but when I had done, the first thing I did for that park was Back to Neverland. And that had also been farmed out to Bob Rogers and Company, and that's where I went to make it. So I directed the project with an outside group for Disney. And of course, I had had a previous history as a Disney feature animator, but Disney was reaching out to have somebody else do it in a way that measured up to their quality standards and play in their park. And it just, I loved the fact that fate just happened to take me to it. And so I got to sort of protect the legacy that I had grown to love at the studio as a Disney feature animator, but made it as an independent group outside of Disney. And then, ironically, Disney, after first crossing their fingers, not sure that any of my team would be qualified to do Disney quality animation, tried to hire everyone out from under me while I was still in production. So Bob Rogers and I had to co-write a letter to the studio saying, we're so glad that your opinion changed from not qualified to we must hire all of them, but please wait until we're done because we're making this movie for you. So so that had been my experience. So when I saw that Colossal Pictures had been hired as the place to do this one, I figured, they had gone to them because Colossal Pictures had a great reputation, doing especially those early IDs for MTV and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And Henry Selick, my dear friend, had gone up to do work with them. And so I think they felt like they were getting a great place to not just farm it out to, but an appropriate group to do something with high energy entertainment and stuff. So I think they felt like they had made a good choice.
Okay. And just for whatever reason, it didn't, there's parts of the script and some of the audio tracks have leaked out. It was not very good.
Well, I can, if you'd like me to tell the story of how I got involved, it was specifically to replace Colossal.
That would be wonderful, yes.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
Which was kind of dicey because I had high respect for Colossal. But, my experience with Cranium Command started with a moment where I was at the opening of the park and I had directed 4 things for Disney MGM Studios. First one, Back to Neverland. And so on the opening night celebration, I saw Eisner, Katzenberg, and Lucas standing together, chatting away, and they all gestured for me to come over. So, of course, I went over to see what the gentleman had to say, and George said, I want you to fix the stunt theater. So he had kind of glaringly not opened the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular. It was there, it was finished, it was limping through how the show should go. Glenn Randall, who was an amazing stunt coordinator on the original Indy films, was there directing the stunt actors, and they were having problems with it. And so George said in front of Eisner and Katzenberg, I want you to go fix the stunt show. Now, I had directed George in one of the short shows for the park on opening day. The editing story was something Anthony Daniels, George Lucas, and R2 were starring in. And so I had gone up to film George at the ranch. I had posted it there. And so he was aware of how I worked because I had directed him. So that's why he asked me to go fix it. And I told him, I do not know how to work in an amphitheater with over 4,000 people and live actors and everything. This is new to me. And he just said, well, it needs showmanship and storytelling. You know how to do that. Go fix it, right? So Eisner and Katzenberg go, yes, go forth. So I thought that was a full plate and a lot of pressure because, of course, they wanted to open it to the public as soon as possible. So the pressure was on. It's like, be the buzzer beater guy, go in and do a quick fix that will make him happy and make the audiences feel more satisfied and get that done. So I thought, okay, that's what I have to do next. Peter Schneider took me aside later that same evening and goes, okay, I know you got a full plate, However, there's this other thing that has an opening day looming, and it's called Cranium Command, and we effing hate it," although he used the full language, and said, "But we can't put our finger on what's wrong with it. But, you've been great at going in and finding out what's wrong and fixing things. So we're going to have a screening. You can go take a look at it, see what we unplugged, and figure out what to do next." So suddenly I had two things to do. So immediately I went, okay, whatever this Cranium Command thing is, I have to live here at the park to work on the stunt theater, because that's item number one, make George happy, get this whole thing retooled, and I can't do that in California. I got to do it here in the park at the venue. So I went, okay, so I'm living here. What am I going to be doing at the same time? So they showed me the footage that Colossal Pictures had done, and I think, it was, and I have high respect for Colossal Pictures and the people that work there and everything, but I think what had happened, and this happened more than once, but it's I think sort of an anxious committee had come in and sort of all co-written and co-directed and given Colossal Pictures strict marching orders of here's what we want you to do, and then it's sort of consensus everything and people raising their hands about every little decision. And I just watched it and said, well, I think it's really patronizing, and I'd be embarrassed for even to take a child to it, because I think they would hate it. And so they said, well, we'll do a conference call. So they put me on with Eisner and Katzberg and Roy Disney, I believe, and Schneider and I think Tom Fitzgerald, Marty Sklar. So it was a whole contingent on the phone, and they're like, okay, what's your verdict? And so I said, well, I think it needs to be reconceived so that you're giving an adventure. You happen to learn while you're in the middle of an adventure. You don't feel like you're being preached to. Because in the original version, the eyes were rarely used. You were being taught this whole lesson about how to manage stress during your day, and these eyes were just dark things that were waiting. And then they'd say, well, let's take a look at an example of what happened today when he was in the hallway. And then the eyes would come on and somebody would go, hi, how's it going? And like, yak, yak, yak. And there would be a little thing. And then the eyes would go off. And like, see, did you learn from that? So I just went, well, first of all, rewrite it. Make it an engaging thing that keeps you interested and takes a character through an adventure. You're writing in somebody's head. Let's know their story. Let's feel like we're invested in the outcome of what happens during their day, and do it in a way that is engaging and just good writing and good acting. And forget the talking down, and try to reach the whole family, every age group. And secondly, let's keep the eyes on. I mean, if part of the message is how do you deal with stress during your day, I mean, one of the reasons you have stress is because you can't just close your eyes and make it all go away. It's there. It's like whatever you're dealing with doesn't go away, and you have to just deal with it. So I went, you're going to feel like you're on a ride if you keep those eyes open. And I do like point of view. I take you places. You have to run to school. You have to, dealing with bullies, whatever you do, you're in the middle of all of that all the time. And just rarely you have a little moment to take a breath and think. Because in real life, you do have those little moments where you get to think a little bit. So. But I said, and also everything was animated. So I said, okay, rewrite, keep it all alive, make it a continuous attraction instead of a stop and go thing. Also have live action for all these crazy body parts. I think sort of a Terry Gilliam-esque kind of thing would just startle people, because everybody expects animation. You go in and see the right and left brain and stuff, and you expect animation. I don't think they would expect to see like a stylized live action crazy body that you're inside of. And instead of getting somebody like Charles Grodin, let's get Charles Grodin himself and like stick him in a crazy set. And so they just heard all of that and just went, yes, go. So it was several major changes like that. And then there was the blessing and the curse. And the curse was a great deal of the schedule had been eaten up by the false, direction that they were going in. So there was only part of the calendar left for the schedule, but and resources too. But the blessing was, they'd already seen what happened when it was like a big stampede of everybody kind of co-directing And so instead, they realized, okay, time is precious. We like your take. Put together a small team, and they really gave me and my boutique-sized little team a lot of creative freedom. And people were not coming in and poking and prodding and giving us 100 changes. They really respected the creative process. So even though it was really fast, it was truly creative, and everybody was supportive. So I think like lessons were learned, and it became a positive lean forward into the tape. So that set a really good vibe. And the last thing I'll tell you, just to wrap up this, how everything intertwined, was I had just opened on the opening day Back to Neverland at the park, and people would go through and see the film with Robin Williams and Walter Cronkite, and the very first stop on their walk-around tour through the working animation studio, which wasn't working yet, it was empty, but hopefully going to be filled with people soon. So they came to the first window, which was the storyboard department, and Walter was saying, "This is where it all begins, in the story department," "Oh, that's great, Robert," So anyway, you would get into this little scenes that would show you all the processes of animation, right? So I went, okay, I'll put my storyboard team for Cranium Command in the fishbowl there where you look through the glass, and at least, I have my film of here's how animation is done, and then when you come to the first stop, there's going to be storyboard artists there doing something, and it'll be my team, who I have to bring all of them here to Florida anyway. So let's have them work there in front of the public. That'll help the animation studio make sense. At least we're seeing something happen. So actually, Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale and Rebecca Rees and Daryl Rooney and a number of people came and sat and worked right in front of the public, storyboarding Cranium Command right in front of the public. So then I could jump over to the stunt theater and work with Glenn Randall, and then I could run back and see how things are going on Cranium Command. And so I was just doing tag team all the time, in Florida.
Crazy, but cool. And it's so nice that you actually integrated the studio space there in Florida. Like it, in retrospect, it makes sense of why you did it, but like it's so cool that you actually had the storyboarding going on in the studio there. And I probably walked by it and I had no idea what it is, but it looked awesome because I was there on opening day and a couple times after that.
Well, it took us several days to get our team together and put in the space. But I've encouraged people to go back and look through their photos and videos that they might have taken at the time of that space, because in the early few weeks after the show opened, any storyboard artist in there was our team working on a Disney attraction.
That's
and
cool.
It was great. They really got used to working in front of the public in the fishbowl. And there was occasionally you'd be distracted and wave to the people as they went by, because sometimes they'd knock on the glass and wave and stuff like that. But people really got used to focusing. But occasionally, it's just you couldn't help it. You do things like do a drawing where it says "Feed the animators, insert quarter here," and then they would do a slot and hold it up to the glass, and people would try to put a quarter through the glass, clink clink, and just playing with silly stuff like that. But once in a while, and I just love that this happened while we were storyboarding on Cranium Command. And we were in that space, and Robin and Walter were inspiring them. And then they'd come out and watch this team working on another show. And every so often, you'd see this pattern happen where you'd see all the legs come by first, and you'd look up and say, okay, there's the people looking at us. And there'd be like a little kid, little boy or girl. And then the group would leave, and then you'd be aware of still somebody there, and you'd look like, oh, the kid stayed behind. And then you'd see the parents come back and come on, sweetie, and trying to drag in. The kid's like, no, I want to watch. So, we would watch for that, and I would either go out or ask one of the other team members to go out and meet the kid. So we'd use the employee's door and come out into the hallway and go, well, we noticed you watching. You were interested in what you saw, and usually the kid had some fascination that they would express. And so, I or one of the other team would tell them, I used to be the kid like you. I used to be looking through the glass. Now I'm doing it. You can do this. And then we would be sure to tell the parents, by the way, I'm serious. We're not patronizing. Your child really can do this. If they believe in it, they want to do it, they can do it. So there were a little ebb and flow of that kind of interaction with the guest that was going on while we were working on the show. And then, then it came time we got in a plan where now we could break into two groups, and Kirk and Gary were going to direct the pre-show, and I was directing the main show. So now we could, and I got the stunt theater to a stage where George Lucas came back and reviewed it and went, thumbs up, let's open it. So then there was kind of a fanfare, and that opened up. And then I was able to go back to California and shoot the two sequences for Cranium Command. So there was the point of view, which was one shoot, and I actually found the schedule for that today. I went through and found schedules.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, look at that, June 1989.
Yes, and then it has the point of view, and then it has on there on the 29th, you see baby due date. So that was our firstborn was born between the point of view shoot, and then our firstborn was born, and then we did the shoot for all the body parts.
Oh my gosh!
And so he was on the set when he was just a couple of days old. Somewhere I've got video. I'm gonna find it. But there's
it's almost
video.
like you were shooting Making of Me at the same time. You could have done this well.
Yeah. So yes, on top of the two shows, there was also our birth of our baby during Cranium Command.
And at any time were you tempted to name the child Buzzy?
a little bit.
A little bit there.
Actually, did he come on the due day there that you had?
It was pretty close to that, and we actually had him on the set for the second part where it was going to actually my first AD took videos of my wife and I on the Right Brain Carousel where John Lovitz was acting with him just a couple of days old. But I was, for the last several nights, sleeping in a cot in the hospital, and then I'd come running back to the set, and it was
oh my gosh,
just kind of crazy. So
yeah, no pressure at all there with holy cow.
So why don't we run through the premise real quick because Jerry, you mentioned the pre-show, and every major Disney attraction has a pre-show, right? And this is kind of like it was fully animated, and was So we're in the pre-show, which is a mini theater, if you will, no seats, right? It's kind of the sloped floor, if I recall correctly. Right. And the premise of the cartoon, which was done really well, and I'd love to know even more about that, Jerry, too, is voices and things like that. Obviously, the Buzzy voice. But the premise was that it was a military type command of recruiting putting the new recruits into the heads for duty, if you will. And so now a couple questions on this, Jerry. Was the idea that you could have your control changed out if they didn't do well? That was the premise, right? You put Buzzy in. If he didn't do well, he would be exchanged the next day with somebody else.
Yeah,
right?
I believe failure was an option. Yes,
it was. Okay.
General knowledge was reading you the riot act that you better measure up.
And if I recall correctly, there was traditional animation, but wasn't there parts of it that was almost done like Monty Python too, with cutouts?
Yes, and in fact, when the door opens to reveal the heads that they're going to ride in, the first two heads that you see are photographs of Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale, who directed the pre-show.
Oh, wow. So they put them in there.
Door opens. They're the first two heads that are going to have pilots put into them. And then a whole bunch of the other team members had their heads in it. And it was, very Monty Python-esque in that it was photographs that were just stills, but they were cut out and placed in the backgrounds in the scene, and they were moved at different speeds to feel like there were some near you and some far from you, and then the top of the head could pop open, and you'd see, a character could be, descend down into it to take the control as a pilot. And they had one where the front of the face was open. I think that pilot was inserted, and then the face slammed closed. So all different fun ways. And of course, they had the fun of just seeing, different crew members that worked on it, getting to see themselves in the film.
That's cool.
And General Knowledge was voiced by Corey Burton, who's an amazing voice guy. And I had worked with him previously. He did all my temp voices for Walter Cronkite and Robin Williams when I was doing the story reel before I had Robin and Walter there. And he did the Captain Hook voice. When they encounter Captain Hook, he had done that. And he had done the Peter Pan voice as well. And then another show I had directed for the same park was Michael and Mickey. And Michael Eisner encounters Chernabog, the big creature from Night on Bald Mountain. And Corey Burton did his voice. It's the first time that character's ever had a voice. So Corey Burton did that voice as well. Now Corey was working with me again, doing General Knowledge's voice. And just amazing, the energy and the intensity he put into that.
So for those that are not indoctrinated into the Cranium Command spirit and anthology that are, so to speak, that has followed it, the premise here is that this commando, as I mentioned earlier, is getting new recruits signed up, that they will go inside a person's head and help control them through the day, getting through different types of scenarios. Now, Jerry, this does lead to kind of a recursive problem. So if Buzzy, our main character here, is going to be inside the 12-year-old boy, who is inside Buzzy's head, and does that just recursively get smaller and smaller? Because I'm a little confused. Did that ever come up?
Nobody's inside Buzzy. Buzzy is like the Jiminy Cricket of the kid.
There we go. So it ends at Buzzy. I was just making sure. So,
he's the Jiminy Cricket character. Yes.
Perfect.
There
Has to
were
make decisions.
so many great little bits of topical humor at that point. I remember we've had some successes, and it's Einstein, right?
Right. Yes.
And some failures, and it's Jim Varney.
Yes.
From the Ernest. So they were really, really good. That was one of the really neat things at that time is Disney not being afraid to use, recognizable characters from society and other media.
Yes.
That worked. That hit. So.
And I think it's important to say that was big at the time too, because you go back to the studios, everybody there was recognizable, right?
Right.
And everybody in this production became recognizable too.
Yes. So Kevin Neal and Dana Carvey doing Right and Left Ventricles of the Heart. Oh. We are up and pumping. With the Hans and Franz they did on Saturday Night Live. It was definitely like based on those recognizable characters.
Right. All right, now I got to ask the question: did you have to get permission from Saturday Night Live, or was?
We got permission for them to come do it. I don't remember the legal wrestling with that, but it just seemed like perfect casting. With George Wendt coming in and playing Appetite, and and Kevin and Dana playing the Pump You Up guys as the Right and Left Ventricles of the Heart, and Charles Grodin being Logic, and John Lovitz being the Right Brain, and creativity and everything. And so it just seemed appropriate, and I'm sure there were legal hoops that were hopped through, but we were in such a pell-mell speed. I'm sure somebody was taking care of that on the behind my back and not worrying me about it. So
Bobcat Goldthwait as the adrenal gland was just
glands. Yeah, Bobcat was so
unbelievable.
And I know the pictures were out on the marquee outside. The lungs. Who was that?
I have to look that up. I know I can find this out, but I've heard people argue about who played bladder and lungs, because those were two different actors, and they weren't featured as much. So I don't have their names on the tip of my tongue, but I know I can look it up. It
was just interesting because they were in the marquee predominant, but they really weren't in the show for very long. So
right.
They don't have that cachet now like everybody else. Like we talk about George Wendt and all these folks.
Hyperventilating, sorry. And the bladder, like, we can't hold it. No.
Right. I completely forgot about the bladder.
Yes, but right away, as soon as he starts his day, he's got to pee. And
that's right. Going back to the pre-show for a second before we get to the main show, I think the other thing that is interesting is that Jerry, in the animation, you guys chose bomber jackets and kind of like it's a flap hat, if you will, for these guys, right? It was a very military type thing, and I think that's neat because you envisioned people going off in World War II and being up somewhere in some sort of control unit.
It's your craft, yes, and the fact that your general is sending you out on the mission.
Exactly. You're going out, so you really pulled in the military style down to the bomber jackets with the wool collar and everything. It was really neat. So I love that little touch that was put in there that just added to the understanding of what these guys. Plus, General's knowledge is his badge is about 7 feet long. So he's obviously
Yes.
he knows what's going on. So
Yes, and boy does he belt out commands. It's just
Oh, yes.
Corey was great.
Oh,
really good.
so quick! How did you get the animation team together? Because I mean, you have such a legacy from Brave Little Toaster, and then I think some of those people ended up working on Back to Neverland. But where did you get that team to work on?
I really left that to Kirk and Gary once we had finished our collaboration on story.
Okay.
And as they went off to start animation and I went off to put together the whole live action thing, we were just so steeped with our work that we just sort of wished each other well and went rushing away to do our various parts of it. And later they saw the main show, and later I saw the animation. And we had all seen everything as storyboards, but we hadn't seen how it all came together during the animation. So Kirk and Gary could speak to that. I'm not sure.
Okay. Excellent.
And do we know the origin of how Buzzy came to be, like that specific character, and what?
Well, in the original show, that was the premise in the Colossal version that was unplugged. So I think that whole premise basically of riding inside of a head, looking out through the eyes, seeing how you balance the needs of the different logic and emotion and appetite and fight and flight and all of those different things, and to have a pilot trying to figure all of that out. And the theater was built to tell that basic kind of story, and so anybody who told a story there like that's the building blocks you're going to work with.
I guess I should have rephrased it more of like the Buzzy being the newbie. Like, how did that come to be? Was that part of the initial story?
Yes, it was just a much more patronizing version of him having to learn lessons in the original version. So, gotcha. But having him be somebody that you root for and is playing it more straight, of really trying to do his best and having a more overwhelming sense of what's coming at him every moment, because the eyes are not closing to only open for lessons to learn. Just getting to work with casting a kid that could play all of that and keep it sort of grounded and believable as you went through it. So the rewriting of it, they left a lot of freedom to just go, we hated the other one, just like make it fun and interesting now. So
you did inherit the theater though, right? Some of the
yes,
yeah.
But I did find in some of the notes that I dug up today that I had the joy of working with Doug Griffith and Dave Fighton, who did the audio animatronics animation of the character, and as they were before we handed down like all the choreography that it had to do, when they were just thinking about how well can it articulate emotions, I found a memo today in my archives. I was digging through just boxes of stuff they hadn't looked in for years because I knew we were going to have a chat. And I didn't have enough time to sort of curate and pull too many things out. But I did find one that was specifically notes that Doug and Dave had given about concerns early on about wanting more capability put in things like the wrist for arm movements and certain things for expression and the brows. And they said, please, before we make him come alive, you have to make it more expressive with body language and with expression in different ways. And so I was reminded of the quick fixes that they were trying to do to help the character be more capable of acting. And then I actually had Daryl Rooney, who I had worked with, and he was actually one of the four. It was me and Daryl Rooney and Joe Rampt and Alex Mann who storyboarded The Brave Little Toaster. And so I was used to working with Daryl. Daryl also worked on Tron, doing some of the hand-drawn effects and things. So we were back together again on this, and I had him really watchdog the animation of Buzzy. So as I was dealing with all the other things in the theater, dealing with the coordination of the 8 screens and the mix and all the different things that were going on, I asked him to really sit and work with Doug and Dave on the animation of Buzzy. And so, we got to see him step by step come more alive. But the first thing I had to establish was so I did the point of view, right? If I have to back up a little bit and to see how the dominoes fell. Did the point of view so you see what's happening out of the eyes. Now you've got two eyes. So Buzzy, who's on the pendulum in the theater, who's kind of swinging out near the audience, could look at either one of the eyes or look at both of the eyes. But after I shot the point of view, I took a little figure to represent Buzzy, and I put it on the top of a pencil, and I filmed this with a video camera, so I had my own mini theater. It's like, here's my little Buzzy, and I'm showing the point of view, and then I would, when the camera would move around the left corner, I'd have him swing to the right, so it would look like there was momentum. So the pendulum would swing, which makes you feel like you're in a ride that's going somewhere, right? So that would govern where he wound up at any given time. If you swung him to the left, he would look at the left eye. If if momentum kind of swung him more out to the middle, I could have him look at either eye or look at the top and bottom screen more comfortably. And so I did that, the choreography of the boom, where the pilot sat. So that was the next thing. And then
That's
I did.
So interesting, because I would have thought that was just an after the fact and not having anybody who's producing the film think about that boom moving. But
so it's point of view,
really cool.
Boom moving, and then as I shot the live actors, I would watch the point of view because they couldn't see any of that, and they had to all stay in sync, and I couldn't show it to them because they had to be maintaining eye contact with the camera or as if they were looking directly out of the screen to look at Buzzy. So I would just direct them looking directly at them, but I had a little screen I could look at to watch the point of view. And then I would cue their lines and stuff to respond, so they would all stay in sync with the point of view. So then we had the actors that were staying in sync with the point of view. So point of view started everything. And then the live actors responded to the timing from the point of view, and the pendulum boom was swinging back and forth, also responding to the apparent physics of the point of view. And then now you had Doug and Dave animating the character, who's now it's like the big swings are already established. So your actor is going places. And so now they would try to make him look like he's also responding to, I'm swinging to the left. What do I do? And, I'm swinging to the right. And then they knew exactly now as he looks at a screen, what's the closest one. So they were able to really keep it nice and crisp and responding directly to the geography in front of them.
And he's got some controls that he's working too while this is going on too, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like and the foot pedals and switches and levers and.
Yes. So they had some nice little tchotchkes for him to play with.
Yeah. How I asked Jerry a few months ago, I said, all right, you got to tell me how much attention to detail was really paid. Did you shoot the left and the right eye with the right ocular distance between that it's in 3D? And he said, no, it was just one and we just duplicated. I said, okay, I'll give you that. That's okay.
Yes. Well, and we had to shift between kinds of camera rigs so much. And it's amazing back in the day how unfriendly the camera rigs were for camera operators for handheld stuff. I mean, it was tricky. There was I was doing long takes with the point of view, right? So one of the longest ones was in the principal's office, where you go in, you sit down, you look down at the boy's hands, wringing his hands on his knees, and you look up at the principal, you look around the office, and then he decides to tell the truth after he has an internal conversation, and then in the same shot, gets up, thanks the principal, and then goes out and has the secretary outside like wink at him. That's all one continuous shot. And so to have a film rig, not a video, but a film camera that carries enough film for that long take, it was heavy. And the camera operator had to be in a real school. We didn't do a set with special removable walls or anything. We were in a real school. And pressed up against the wall and leaning over the kid, so his back is killing him while he's trying to hold this heavy camera. And it was so hard, and he was sweating, and he would sometimes just lose and just have to stop it because he couldn't hold the camera anymore.
Oh my gosh.
And then I could kill myself. I learned to be very careful with my words. We were going through a long take, and he finally had got it. He had gotten past the toughest part, and so I knew it was going to be smooth sailing from now on because he had gotten his back straightened up again. And I just quietly said, "Great." And he went, "What?" And he put the camera down, and I went, "Oh." He said, "I thought you said cut." And I went, "No." I said, "Great." So then it was like he had to suck it up and do it again. But so you had things like that. And then at other times, something like when he first wakes up in the morning, there's, that kind of camera rig being held on a bed with somebody like that's climbed on the bed next to the person and now has to climb off the bed to go across the room. And then switch to with a swish point where we could do a graceful cut to Steadicam for going down the stairs. And they had to call a special Steadicam operator because, Davey Walsh, who was my director of photography, he said, the thing that's going to kill you is the stairs. And you have Steadicam for that. We're in a real house. We don't have anything to help us. So we have to get like the super leg Steadicam operator. And it was a woman they all knew. And she had like the super legs. So and she came and she was like lean and had muscular legs. And she put on that rig. And she could do as many takes as I needed and not wear out. It was just amazing that was her reputation. But then, you go to chase the school bus, and it's like going out the door, we switch on going past the door jam to a pogo cam. And it was an athletic guy holding a pogo cam with the, a weight on one side and the camera on the top, and just literally ran over the hood of a car. And so we were constantly passing the baton to these different kinds of cameras, and to do them with stereoscopic separation and twice as much film to shoot, it just wasn't feasible.
Yeah. Were you having to pull focus during these shots too, or was it like a fixed focus? So
there sometimes was, yeah, and but it was really tricky because we had to keep everyone out of sight of this wandering point of view, and so. I also was playing back reference audio on a boombox, so it was like walking around and playing reference audio to keep things in sync, because I had to do a track estimating what my voice actors, what my on-screen actors of right and left brain and appetite and adrenal glands and everything, what they would likely do, and do a whole reel of that, and now play that back audio-wise while we're shooting the point of view. So audio track generally led the point of view before the point of view led the shooting of the
oh my gosh.
interiors. And then this was another really fun thing about rehearsing and working with the effect of the point of view, because you're not just shooting a continuous POV camera. You're supposed to be inside the head of this kid who's going through different emotions. And so one place we particularly had fun playing with it was when he meets the girl that sits next to him in the science class, and he hasn't met her before. And so we had a rehearsal, and I actually found, by the way, did we ever discuss the school, the location of the school?
Not particularly, no.
I found it today.
Oh, really?
It was John Muir Junior High.
John Muir Junior High.
It was at 1111 41s North Kenneth Road in Burbank, California. So that's the school where we shot. And I found some location scout photos. And in that memo,
so that's the chemistry lab as well as the
principal's office, and it's where we run in the front door, and the lockers, the bank of lockers as well. But I had to do a trick to marry those because those were not outside the principal's office. But I have the note here on that same memo of where it is, rehearsal time for Natalie Gregory, who played our on-screen girl, and then the two bullies. And it says rehearsal time at the school. So I went there with my video camera, and I was talking to Davey Walsh and his camera operator about putting some kind of attitude for the character into the point of view. So they're like, what do you mean? So I said, well, you're sitting next to her and you just bluntly look, there's somebody there. And then you realize, oh, it's this girl, I've never met her before, I'm kind of shy. And so then, you look away, and then it's like you dare to look back and it's like see her hands and you're like, I wonder if she's looking at me. It's like, oh no, she's not. So I can look at her. I see her profile, but she's kind of aware that I'm looking, and then she glances at me, and whoop, I look away because she made eye contact, right? So then I would do this just with my video camera, and then we'd play it back and look at it, and then the camera operator would go, oh, I get it, and he'd sit down, and now he would start to play with those ideas. And we did a little bit, like at the end when she gives him a little kiss on the cheek, we did a little bit of a woo, a little woozy camera, like his head is reeling. So not just strictly getting the shot done, but trying to put a little bit of flavor of being inside of a character who's going through emotions.
Wow.
And we never really do see the boy, and actually I can't even find his credit in anywhere. We only see him in the mirror.
Scott Curtis,
morning.
yeah. We see him in the morning, and we also see him one more time in the reflection of the trophy case in the hallway.
But what people don't realize that he did the acting, but that he also did the voice of Bugsy.
He did the voice, and he did the voice, and he did the on-screen acting for all the hands and legs and stuff. And so the way I cast the kids, I just went, I don't know if I'm going to find somebody who can do all of it. But I went, first thing I have to solve is who's the kid that's going to come along and do all the choreography next to the camera. So when the camera looks down and you're putting pants on, it's like I need a kid that knows how to tuck right next to the camera and be in the act of putting the pants on, and then to get the hell out of the way while the camera runs down the hallway, and then get back to the right spot to put a hand in to do something, and run downstairs, like follow the Steadicam operator, and then get tucked underneath her but not bump her to feed the camera with the fork and have his hand not shake and like all of that stuff. So I did an audition where I just explained to kid after kid, we're going to have two things we're going to do. You're going to sit down and eat breakfast. So the camera operators come over and look at the plate. You're going to have to tuck in and feed the camera, have it come right under the lens like it's going to the mouth. And then we're going to go look in a mirror. And I need you to lean in and stop as the camera stops, and then lean out with them. So I'm going to do a count. 1, 2, 3, stop. 1, 2, 3, go. Right? And so if they could feed the camera and then stay in sync for their own reflection in the mirror, I knew that's somebody that I could work with, because I didn't want in this complex shoot to have the kid who was going through so much trouble to try to do that choreography to be the weak link in the whole schedule. It could easily be take after take you get just because that didn't work.
Right.
And Scott Curtis was so good. He was so intuitively good at that. I never had to redo a take because he missed his mark. And he had a great voice for it, and he was a good actor. And so I just lucked out with him. And then the thing that was a little bit embarrassing was I found out the kid that I didn't want to use from the first film that I had let go. We had let all of that go. He showed up to see Scott. He was his buddy. So it's like Scott had taken his role.
Awkward.
But he was really nice about it. I mean, he didn't complain. I was amazed. He just
that's acting.
Showed up to be supportive.
That's awesome.
Also, just something else that we encountered was during the. Sometimes I look back at it and think it would be nice to do some of the blends from one camera to the other, one location to the other, a little bit more color matching or lighting matching or something. We're at the mercy of the sun, like when we were doing the outside run for the school and stuff. But a couple of them we were able to pull off pretty well. And one of them was coming out of the principal's office and then being tapped on the shoulder, and there's a big panic, and then Buzzy calms them down and says, calm down everybody, now come full about. And you turn around and you see that it's the hallway of lockers, and she's there to talk to him. Well, that was at the school. The lockers was in a whole different place than the principal's office. So there was a hallway leading one way to the principal's office, and then just a wall. So as he went out, I needed him to turn towards the wall and magically have lockers there. So I just came up with something on the fly. And so I told Davey, I said, if we, and Bill Matthews, by the way, was my amazing production designer. So Bill Matthews is the reason that all those crazy, environments for the internal body parts happened and everything. And so I talked to Davey Walsh and Bill Matthews and said, if we put outside the principal's office when he first comes out, like a chair and a painting and a flag or something there. And then we go to the locker hallway that has none of that, and we just put that stuff at the end of the locker hallway. And so when we come out of the principal's office, we'll see that, and then we'll sweep away from it, blur frame across it to a wall, and I cut. Now we go to the locker hallway, and I start on all that stuff, and I blur frame away from it to see the lockers. Now we just find the sweet frame to cut it on. So we actually did that, and that one worked quite well.
I was gonna say you might also have, maybe you did, and I have to go back and watch it. Did you ever use the eye blinking as a chance to, change something real quick too?
We didn't, just because it was such a big screen. I thought that you would really notice that. But we did do like a bump with somebody getting bumped. I think when the bullies are ahead of you in the cafeteria line, there was a bumping where you go into the back for a moment on the shirt to be a cut point.
I also want to let you know too, one of the bullies, his latest work is in the Powerpuff Girls. So he's really he's still moving that bully persona.
Okay.
It's been typecast.
Yeah, exactly.
And then something else that we solved on the fly was the inside the body parts we had. In storyboards, it was easy to take something like the stomach, and we knew George Wendt was going to be in there with the deep wading boots and stuff. And so we would just draw the stomach acid comes up, the food comes dropping in, and it goes from like ankle deep to suddenly waist deep, and he's wading around and all this stuff. And just everybody on my crew, who dealt with real life instead of animation, was like, you can't do that. You can't add so much water that in a big open set where you can see a lot of it, to see the level change like that. We'd have to pump so much water in that it just would be impossible. And even if we could do some sort of big tank that would suddenly dump all of this, which by the way would create such a wave, it would just sweep him away. But even if we did that, to reset for take 2, are you kidding? It was like 5 hours per take. So I just was determined, there's got to be a way where we see that. So I just huddled on the side with Bill, and we go, you know what? Let's say that the camera and the set is moving together. The camera moves up and down, and there's just water that's still, but we lower the set deeper into the water, and we move the camera down at the same time, so you don't know the camera's even moving. It's just locked together. And so we talked to Davey about it, and he goes, well, let me see an example, demo it. So we got a bucket, and we put water in it, and we took little strings and made a little quick thing. And then I used my home video camera, and it's okay, 1, 2, 3, lower, wait, 1, 2, 3, go up. And we took it back to him, and we said, what do you think you're looking at? And he goes, I'm looking at water level change. It's are you looking at a moving camera? No, I'm seeing water level change. He went, aha, we did it this way. So he's like, okay, build it. And we built it and did it. So it was just really fun to be with a team that was ready to do that kind of invention on the fly, and then be excited that it happened. It's nobody was strangling each other or doing anything. We're just how can we make this work? Oh, this works.
These are the neat little movie magic thing. Remember we talked to Jeff Blythe about the challenges he had. I love these little tricks that you need to do in order to pull the stuff off without blowing the budget, and nobody is any of the wiser, right?
There were so many neat things in those live action sets too. Charles Grodin's, all the boxes that would move in and out against the walls, and just stuff.
It was like being inside of a Rubik's Cube, sort of. I mean, that was kind of our, it was, And again, Bill Matthews, and he was very analog with working that out. So it was a big construction that was wood with a framework, and all those boxes were painted wood. And we stationed 15 people outside that would push in with just their arm, push them in, pull them out. So I would just sort of cue them oh, the poodle has to come out here. And when he says this line, have the shower happen. And the toilet with the dotted line has to come out when he says this.
Because all that stuff corresponded to their dialogue. Oh,
yeah.
Gosh,
so they're behind, they can't see anything, but they hear the dialogue and go, oh, this is my cue. So it worked out.
Gosh. So many cool. And you said the turntable on the there was a turntable on
Right Brain.
One second with John Lovitz, right?
Yes, the Right Brain set had actually it was a disc on the floor that he would stand on that had portions moving different directions. So the outer ring was drifting to the right, and then there was a middle ring that was drifting to the left, and then the center was going to the right again. So as he stepped, and I tried to do them slow enough so he wouldn't trip, but he actually, as he stepped deeper or shallower into the set, he would be pulled different directions. And so he had to be aware of kind of coming to find the camera. It was part of the swimming right brain, colorful place. And then at the top, out of the camera frame, were hanging hoops that were doing the same counter movements with one another. And they were hanging things down into the set from the top. So everything was kind of a carousel of movement. Wow. And poor Johnny was like, I'm starting to get seasick here. And it was really, he started to get some motion sickness partway through. So I had to be careful how much time I spent him on the carousel.
People, we always talk about like the level of detail that Disney does in attractions. And like, if this is not one of the greatest examples of the thought and the detail upon detail and the coordination, it's like, this is the example where it's like you would spend the time to work all this stuff out so it made sense. And I don't know if anyone would do that today. It's like, that's always my question. It's like, someone's like, oh, we're going to spend 4 months to like shoot pick your future of Horizons. And that's totally fine. I'm constantly astounded by that era of like how much effort was put into the attractions for things that you may not notice, and it's so appreciated.
And a lot of that was just the boutique sized team working on it, just determined to get things accomplished. I actually, when I was just about to shoot the food fight scene, I had a couple of the executives back at the studio call me to quick come visit. And so we were setting up and getting ready. So they shuttled me over there, and they're going, you're being too ambitious. It's like they had thrown the other show out, and then the top brass had approved the show I was going to do, but then I had people in the middle going, but you're doing too much, and it's like, well, don't you want it to be good? It's like, yes, but so they gave me this warning: we don't think you can finish. You're doing too much. So I said, well, are you going to give me enough resources so I can finish? And they went, no. And I said, are you okay with me giving you part of a show? And they said, no. So I said, well, I guess I should just go back and finish it, shouldn't I? Like, okay, but we'll be close by if you need anything. So I said, okay. And then we went back and we did it. And, people were worried. They were biting their nails. But our whole little team was like, we're going to finish everything. We're going to do it. And then we're going to, wait, water has to move. Do it. So I'm sure if that had to go through layers of department after department and approvals of committees and stuff, that probably would have taken a long time and probably been a much more expensive solution. But just winging it, we were able to find something that really did work for all of us and stay within our constraints. And right. So I just loved working with such a motivated team of people, and they realized it was sort of like it felt like you were on stage all the time, because there was this sense of the point of view being continuous, and then the live action of the characters responding to that, and knowing that the audience was going to feel like they were there with you, and to have things happen with the actors, like when he's getting overheated, and we would have vapor go into the set, so it would look like he's blowing steam off. It would go into the set, but we knew it was going to go into the theater too. So when I was in the theater, I was able to coordinate the vapor in the screen inside the movie, and then outside over the audience's head as well. So people kind of felt more like they were doing theater. They were like on stage where the audience was going to be involved, and the red light that was flashing in the set was going to be flashing in the theater too. And and it was the first time we had 10 channels of discrete sound to move around in one theater. So I was very aware of being able to use that. And again, it felt like the audience is going to go with us. And so we started thinking about it as an attraction, like a ride, instead of a standstill theater. We felt like, well, we've taken them somewhere. We've taken them. out of their house and across the lawn. And
Is this like the first theater that had different effects? Well, Captain EO came out a little before, so
Yeah.
that's right. That was like 86.
Yep.
But it's still one of the first attraction types with a specific. Yeah, that's one of the early ones.
yeah, and with as far as audio, I think that was the first one that had that many discrete tracks available. So there were certain things about the custom theater that definitely made it one of a kind.
Yeah.
For quite some time. And I remember my first AD, Michael Haney, was a terrific guy. He was able to handle all the weird complexity of it. But when we were putting together the story reels to deal with eventually how the thing would come together, you could never see all of it because, it wasn't in the theater. So you'd see the point of view, you'd see what the body parts were doing, but you couldn't ever see the audio animatronic figures because those were two that physically were going to be in the theater with you. And so until you were there doing the mix, they weren't participating except only as audio. But I remember him coming in the day before we started the shoot, and he came in and he went, "I finally figured out how all this fits together." I went, well, that's good because we're starting to shoot tomorrow. But it was such a complex web to deal with, to like which drives what and how it all eventually is going to fit together. And I was so proud of him. The next thing he did was T2 with James Cameron. And he called me from there and he said, Cranium Command prepared me for Terminator 2.
That's amazing.
And I also, it was sweet that Marty Sklar, and he would come and sit with Katzenberg when I was starting to take some of the footage and put it together and mock up what I could in the West Coast before I took it out to mix there. And there would always be a moment where Katzenberg would turn and go, "Wait a minute, who's talking?" And I'd go like, "Oh, that's Buzzy. You can't see him here. He's in the theater. He's a character that's on a boom." And oh, okay. And Marty would just say, "I'm so glad that you know how it fits together in your head because I can't make heads or tail of it, but I know you know what it's going to be." And then I'd get some more done and invite him back, and the same moment would happen. "Wait, who's talking?" "Oh, that's hypothalamus." "What? I thought it was Buzzy." "Well, there's another one." And then it would be Marty going, "I'm glad you know what this is going to be." And then, of course, when we were in the theater and mixed it, they came and went, "Oh, great, this is it all works." And while we were mixing, I had our little newborn Ian, who's now a film composer, laying on the seat beside me with ear muffs on, so it would protect his ears. But I was mixing, and I have some of the videos of being in the theater, and then it would pan down and see him laying on the seat next to me. So he was there for the whole thing.
That's so cool.
I gotta admit, Jerry, I mean, there is a lot. I can see why somebody who doesn't have this full vision in their head, no pun intended, or pun intended, I guess you could say, of how all these different components would actually come together, right? Because there is a lot going on, and not understanding, why did you just film this one guy as a lung, you know what I mean? And this one guy standing in a bucket of water. Right. I'm not seeing it.
And you go, right now, we're moving down the hallway, and we're looking at a toilet for a moment, and you realize, while we look at it, it has to be just long enough for the bladder to deliver his line. But he's not going to know, so I have to estimate how long his line is going to be before he says it with temp line.
Right.
So the camera holds that long, and it goes away. And as soon as that happens, you're locked. You go like, okay, now you've written it in stone, and the actor actually has to say it in the length of time that the point of view gives him to say it. So now you've given him handcuffs. So hopefully if you did that well, it's comfortable for him. If not, he's got to rush or take longer. So yeah, there's just all this cause and effect. And then to have the characters leave time for Buzzy's lines, and then to be able to look at him and know when they're referring to each other or referring to him, and with him referring to everybody. And I must say that just with Doug and Dave doing the animatronics, and with Daryl Rooney, sort of guiding that process in the theater, they just did a beautiful job of Buzzy seeming to really see and hear and relate to everything that was going on in the world, and to the characters specifically, looking down and looking up at the characters. And Daryl also was doing the auxiliary monitors. There were extra 4 monitors that were dealing with like the heart rate and different graphs and things that would show up to indicate what was going on inside the body. So so he also had that task. But yeah, the audio
it's like you had a
animatronics-
Fitbit before it was a thing,
That's right. But yeah, Daryl and the 2 animators just did a beautiful job. And I remember that a few years later, it was, I don't know what had gone on with the system, but it was softening where Buzzy used to look like right at the screen and then right at the other screen and just be crisp. And then it started to be, he would kind of be a little sluggish and not look all the way where he was supposed to look. And I remember at this time, a few years after it was open and playing, and it sort of softened a bit, they asked me for one of the reference videos I had taken in the theater to use as reference to kind of refresh Buzzy's actions so he would get fully back to the crisp version. So in the last days of the show, I'm not sure if it was in the crisp shape or the soft shape, but when we first opened, he was definitely felt fully engaged. And then I also did another little trick with the hypothalamus voice, where they had seen that the animators had put themselves in the pre-show, and Kirk and Gary, and they went, okay, enough, no more of this stuff of putting yourself in the show, like it's done with that. So, but as Kirk was storyboarding before they even started the pre-show, I just fell in love with his voice as hypothalamus. He could do the "don't thank me," just this. I just do all the automatic stuff, and nobody, So he just did that so beautifully. I went, oh God, he has to be hypothalamus. So I went ahead and just recorded him as hypothalamus and put it in and mixed it. And I knew that they had this mandate, like no more people being involved in it. But I cast him. I'm directing it, and I cast him. I'm not doing it because he storyboarded and directed the pre-show. I'm doing it because he's the perfect voice for that character. But I would have gotten in trouble if I had asked for permission. So I didn't, and I just did it. And so then I was there, and it was with Peter Schneider in the audience, and we were watching it with an audience. And as the show opened, and we were all enjoying the show and how the people would react to the show, and we were feeling good about meeting our opening day and having a show we were proud of there. And then as Kirk was doing the last thing of, Madam, you forgot your child. Oh, that's your husband? I'm very sorry. I mean that. I said, isn't that a perfect voice? And he was like, oh, you bastard. And I was like, yep, it's Kirk. And he was like, well, yes, he is perfect for it. But it's like I had to sneak it past to get it in and not cause the turmoil beforehand. But once they heard his voice and he was in, they went, yep, he was perfect.
I'm not ashamed to say he is my favorite character in that show. Hypothalamus is my favorite character, and from the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good.
That's fun, and that was something that Rebecca, when she was working on the show, really cracked that character to have that thankless attitude. Like when we were wrestling with story and like how to give each character their due, it's like she cracked that nut, and then Kirk just performed it so beautifully. So I had to thank Rebecca and Kirk for making that magic. And something else that was really fun in the theater was, depending on where you sat, you had a different experience in relation to Buzzy. Because, he might swing away from you if you're on one side of the theater and be delivering a line totally away from you next to other people. But you'd experience that moment with him talking to the characters. If you sat on the other side of the theater, now he was right close to you. Yeah. And since his speaker was traveling with him on the boom, that was one of the 10 discrete tracks, and it would just stay with him. You would hear his voice in close proximity to you or in the distance. So he sort of mixed himself in the room as he moved around, and that was a fun thing for people to experience. It always, I think, kept it kind of fresh.
And that's what's interesting too, is that things like that, where a simple trick makes the attraction that much more different the next time you go through, just increases its rewritability. Maybe I'm coining a term tonight. But it just, even though you've seen it again, you want to see it from a different angle and see it from a different perspective. So,
and I remember being one of the few people that knew there was a big tank outside the building, and I knew that had to do with our vapor. So it was like LN2 or something that was in the in the tank and was ready to spray into the theater when it needed the vapor and stuff. But it was to get it out of the way, it was actually outside the wall. So I would as I was backstage, I would go, oh, that's actually part of how Cranium Command works. And then it was fun to go experience the whole pavilion,
Oh my gosh, there's so much to tell. That's a whole extra episode, Jerry.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I also remember that MetLife, they were the sponsors, and they had some. They wanted to make sure the messaging was clear. Use your head, don't lose your head was something they liked the sound of that. And it was like, yeah, it's more of that. So I found some memos where it was the MetLife people asking about. There was something where they were concerned that people remember the different ways that stress affects you. And in one draft of what I had written, they felt like the appetite and fight or flight was getting a little confused what they would do to you. So, I took pains to separate out some of those moments so you really felt like, okay, fight or flight is doing this. And you understand that. Okay, now let's make sure we know what appetite is up to. He's trying to get energy to the body, and even though fight or flight is dealing with some stuff over here, appetite is still like dying to get more fuel into the body. But you separate those things so that they wanted to make sure that people understood the different parts of your body and how they respond to stress. And so it actually became a useful collaboration back and forth where they had stopped trying to co-write things, which might have been part of what was going on with Colossal. But they gave notes about messaging. And so it was still up to me to write it and to get it performed and to direct how it would come together. But there were some good notes about, as you were saying, that mental health and management of stress. And I also found just handwritten notes about like the moments where he says, what do you suggest? Be logical, do what you feel. If we're going to do both, we'll tell the truth. Moments like that, just the handwritten notes where there's scenes like that would happen. Or I found the one where it's like, look at the way your eyes twinkle in that fluorescent tube lighting. The first time I had written that down. So
it's always a great line, isn't it?
So yeah, it was just I found the first time I had written that down.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I swear I have stuff of the sets being built, and I remember taking video of the big food chunks that were made, and that was so fun to coordinate, like where in the point of view I had things like the M&Ms picked up and then go to the mouth, like, oh, we picked up the M&Ms, we ate them, and then in the body part you'd see the giant M&M splash into the George Whitney's like, manna from heaven, and the big burger and stuff. So we had to have the giant props of food made and then sync them up to match from the point of view into the body parts. Right. And Rebecca was reminding me that we, brought some of the giant M&Ms home, and our kids played with them for years, and eventually they got beat up. But we had giant M&Ms around the house.
That's fantastic.
But I was remembering another thing that was another fun thing that we solved was the bully when picks Bobby up and is carrying him. That we actually just handed him the camera. So we started inside the trash can, and we went and did the charged at him. Well, actually before he threw us in the camera. So we're talking to him, and he comes in, and he just looks like he grabs him. We just gave him the camera, and so he picked it up and he's holding it up and like telling it off, and then he's the one who stuffed it in the trash can. He just became a camera operator for that shot.
That's awesome.
So he kind of liked that as an actor, to be like, what? Oh, I'm doing the camera? Oh, cool. And then it was fun to go do the the attack him, like hit him in the face. And that was, again, Scott Curtis had to do the run up and smash him in the face with the Jello while the camera operator was running with him. And all of that. And I did briefly get to talk to Scott has resurfaced a bit, and so that was great. We emailed each other a few times, actually, just several months ago, earlier this year.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, Scott Curtis sort of realized that there was a fan base out there that was intrigued by him.
He
and
did
his
an
role in
interview.
Cranium Command.
He did an interview with the Tomorrow Society podcast.
He did? Okay.
Sometime in the last year or two. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Cool.
it was cool to be in touch with him recently. So that was neat. I wonder if they did that. To go see what the show amounted to afterwards. I hope as many of them did that as possible, because they couldn't know while they were in the shoot what it would all amount to. It's just
Right.
It's so different from even a standard movie, because the theater itself was participating in the adventure. It doesn't happen in a movie.
We hear stories from talent all the time that are like, oh, I never got to see it. Or it's like, oh, I finally went after 20 years and this is the first time I get to. So yes, it's, I wonder how many of them actually got to go see the show in context. And actually got to enjoy it.
It's funny, when I first met Dana Carvey, he and Kevin was showing up right around that time, but Dana arrived a little early, so I was showing him around, and like, this is the big heart thing you're going to climb into and stuff. So he's like, oh, cool, and he's looking around at different things, and then I don't know, I was in the middle of talking to something about him, and he like stops and he goes, wait a minute, are you the director? And I said, yeah. And he went, oh, I didn't even know. He said, God, the last director I worked with was such an asshole. It's like, that's nice to meet you. So we wound up having a great time together, and I've got a silly picture where and in the video too, they were saying, oh, what a girly man, and they were like dissing me and stuff. And I handed somebody the camera.
So, Jerry, one of the things that sticks out about this pavilion is how different it was from the rest of Future Road, because all of Future Road was like a snapshot of futurism as envisioned somewhere between 1977 and 1980. And then there's this
and then there was us.
Turquoise and pink explosion. What was that like for you?
Well, actually, I was just so hyper focused on it from the night that the opening night of Disney MGM Studios, where they said, we want you to go tackle this thing. I had just been on a marathon focusing only on that. So, I went from storyboarding in the park and then going back to Los Angeles and filming and trying to mock up most of it there, but then going and sitting in the venue for the mix. And it was all just absolutely, I was so hyper focused. I was not looking around to see like, oh, what's our neighborhood? Where do we fit in? I was just trying to get our thing done beautifully on time. And my producer, Jay Height, he was kind of strolling around a little bit, between things. And so he said, have you sort of taken a walk around Epcot and just kind of see what else is going on out there and, recently? And I said, well, no, I've just been focusing on this. And before I was focused on the other park, I had 4 shows opening. And then before that, I was at the Magic Kingdom a lot, but, I haven't really taken a look recently. And he goes, well, you should just kind of stroll around a little bit, because we're either going to stick out like a sore thumb, or we're going to be the new standard for what people expect, because it's like crazy different from anything else people are going to encounter. So I did sort of take a stroll around a little bit when I had a break, and yeah, I saw his point that we were different, and you just cross your fingers. You hope that it will be the new standard instead of the sore thumb. And so I just, we just stayed pedal to the metal and finished everything up, and we're hoping for the best, and thankfully good things happened.
Well, a semi-related question, as we talked about you were kind of brought in as a fireman to fix the show.
The fixer.
After what was originally done. What was MetLife?
It's like in Pulp Fiction, the fixer guy.
Yeah, so Wexter Wolf over here. What was MetLife's? Obviously, they had a lot of probably input into what the original show was, which may have been why it was a little flat. What was their involvement, if any, in the creative process once you were there?
I did send some story things to them, and I wanted to get their feedback and make sure that they were good with the messaging. I'm not somebody for consensus filmmaking and project making, but I am into collaboration for sure. And so I thought, well, they have an area of expertise. And making a attraction is not one of them, but talking about how you manage stress and everything and all of that, they have some people that have some deep knowledge there. So I did find recently some of the memos that went out where it was, specifically hearing their thoughts about, could we carve out some messaging a little clearer or whatever. And I was happy to take that and go, okay, making a client happy. They're not telling me how to direct it or write the story, but they're telling me, I'm not sure this little thing, this gem pops out enough for us, for our checklist of messaging. So I'm like, okay, cool. And then I would carve it out in a way that I felt comfortable and, put a little summary back in front of them. And so time after time, they would give the thumbs up. So it wound up being a real positive, interplay.
That's really interesting because, I think there's always a lot of questions of, we've heard before that, obviously there's corporate messages that want to be delivered and how much of a fine line that is to walk between the Imagineers and creators and creative people and not creating a very boring corporate film or experience.
Yes, exactly. And I was so glad that, and that's probably why we were given enough creative freedom to really go for the energy and the entertainment and the character and the emotion, because they had done the more contained one that was staying in all the guardrails everybody put up for it in the previous version that they wanted to bail out on. So I think everybody, including the people that were giving notes from that side, had sort of learned that lesson. And it's like, we're not going back in that ditch, but we are in a collaborative way listening to each other. So
it's great.
Another interesting thing, Brian, you mentioned that, how it stood out, was different and all that. I find what's interesting about Wonders of Life is we talked about before, and I know if, how always gets the East and the West confused, but we'll go over this again. The West side of Communicore was all of the soft sciences, the living and stuff, which is where you think Wonders of Life would be. So you had imagination and land and sea, and then on the East side, you had energy and space and motion and all that. It's very interesting that Wonders of Life kind of jumped the norm of the planning of, even though we've talked about the landscape and the hardscapes are very hard on the East and very soft. So it's very interesting that Wonders of Life, DNA and all this stuff, just, it didn't fit into that area. And it really was the first thing in Epcot that I think just kind of got plopped where I'll say it doesn't belong, so to speak, in the architecture of the park. We can all argue now.
It looked like a big spaceship that landed there. It
Yeah,
it's a big golden dome that lowered,
but it's I call it a
here.
soft science. It's an earth science. It's, you know what I mean. Others could argue it's a hard science, but it just life and ocean and
I think
Go
I'll
ahead.
give my input as to why that may be, Todd.
Yeah.
On the other side, those pavilions had a lot of things to do. You didn't just have the attraction that you rode through. You then had the image works, or you had the various things in the food court at the land, and in the sea, you ended up in the aquarium where you could spend time. On the opposite side, you waited in line to do a 46-minute ride with the dinosaurs and energy, or you waited in a long line to go on to the World of Motion, and at the end you were in a car showroom, and that was pretty much it. You were in the Trans Center.
Yep.
And Horizons, that was it. I mean, you left Horizons. You stood in a long line to ride the ride. So it added a level of interactivity with all of those activities and things to do in the Wonders Pavilion that just didn't exist in the other pavilions on that side of the park. I guarantee you somewhere, somehow, somebody living or dead says Brian Miles is right on that. That's why that was put there.
And that could very well be because it helped balance the amount of crowds, because that whole soft side was very indoor intense, right? And could suck a lot of people, and the others were,
So and it was a lot of waiting. It was you waited, you rode the ride, and then you moved on.
Yeah, right. So,
well, then on when we were going to open the show, they gave told everybody to be very prompt with giving interviews and everything. They had very good sort of huddling with people to talk about how to be ready and to deal with the press, because it was going to be reviewing things and stuff. And so they gave us a sort of a class pointers of things to hit and stuff. So I felt very responsible. And then the morning of where we were going to go live with the press, the protocol for the cards was changed at the gate. So I was held back. I couldn't get in. And I said, but I have to go live. And they said, well, sorry, protocol changed. And I said, but you saw me coming in the last few weeks. And they're like, yeah, but rules. So I actually had to sneak in the back door of a commissary. I just found it, and I'm not giving anybody any hints, and maybe they changed the security, but from where I had parked, go talk to the guard and get turned away, I was able to sort of walk and check and look, and I saw, a eatery for employees. And so that was that employee eatery where I waited for somebody to come out, and then I went in, and I had my old badge that was no longer good today, but it was still a badge with my name on it. But I just thankfully got in, went directly to the spot, and then talked to people, and got on the air just in time, and we talked to people, and we were so happy that the press then, we compared notes, and they were calling the show MTV Meets Wonder Years. So it kind of was acknowledging the almost overload of what was going on in the room, but the sort of heart of the main character you're going along with, and the sort of sweetness of where they wind up with figuring things out and telling the truth ultimately, and being a help to someone and having it appreciated and feeling like they're making progress. So we took the MTV Meets Wonder Years as a great answer to, will we be the sore thumb or the new standard? And we thought, well, maybe it's kind of leaning towards new standard. People are getting a kick out of it. But it was so scary for me after that whole thing, and being asked specifically by the big guys, go drive this thing to the finish line and open it big, and then to almost not make it live on the air for the opening press event was just like so scary. I thought, what are they going to think of me? So having to sneak in was the answer.
We hear all these stories similar to yours, where they were the person and they had to run back to the hotel and get dressed because that was the Lake Buena Vista one. Remember, they were building the whatchamacallit, and the guy had to run. He barely made the grand opening. There's been stories when we talked to Mark Eads, like he was in there and barely had time to finish the job, and then didn't even get to see the grand. It's just amazing how a lot of that stuff just happens like that.
And that wasn't the only time it happened to me. I was going to
say, didn't that happen to you in Paris too?
It did, yes. Yeah. That's a whole other story. But yes, in a very big way, it happened in Paris. But Marty Sklar sort of helped me out, and once I made it past the gauntlet, then Eisner was like, "Where have you been?" And it's like long answer.
Oh goodness.
And then so we were happy with the reviews, the MTV Meets Wonder Years, but then my mom got in touch with me several years later, and she said, "Oh, your show Cranium Command got a great review in Carl Sagan's new book, Demon Haunted World. I just read the whole thing, and you're in there." And I was like, "Mom, I'm not sure you're right." That sounded like a very proud parent mistake, but she was right, and she had underlined it, bless her heart, in her hardbound copy. It was like ink underline for the paragraphs about her son. But yes, this was at Carl Sagan, The Demon Haunted World. Science as a Candle in the Dark. And I actually have, if I could share screen, I have the way I showed it on my website. I'll just bring it up and read along here. He's talking about the problems with science and with education, and he starts out with this leading paragraph. It's easy to find it in the paperback. It's page 345. So 345 at the bottom of the page has this preamble. He says, "The problems in public education, in science and other subjects run so deep that it's easy to despair and conclude that they can never be fixed. And yet, there are institutions hidden away in big cities and small towns that provide reason for hope. Places that strike the spark, awaken slumbering curiosities, and ignite the scientist that lives in all of us. And then he gives 7 examples of reasons for hope about the state of science and education. And we are number 6 in the list of 7. And this is his quote. Seated in the theater, you find yourself inside the head of an 11-year-old boy. You look out through his eyes. You encounter his typical daily crises, bullies, authoritarian adults, crushes on girls. You hear the voice inside his head. You witness his neurological and hormonal responses to his social environment. And you get to wonder how you work on the inside. So Carl Sagan, Demon Haunted World, New York Times bestseller, was definitely the coolest review I could ever ask for. And so I made sure the rest of my team members found out about it. This was, I think it was in '96 that it was published. So we had several years to discover it.
That's really cool.
Isn't it mind-blowing that Carl Sagan went
it's so cool. Well, A, that he went to see it, and then B, that he put it permanently in one of his books.
Yeah.
It's just astounding. And as a reason to hope about the state of science being communicated with people. It just was so cool. And to go from, help, we've got a problem, there's a show we hate, to Carl Sagan going, this is reason for hope. It's like, what an arc that was.
And if he was still here today, he probably would tell us that since then, billions and billions of people have seen it, have witnessed an amazing growth.
That's right. Hey, that's pretty
and
good.
It began inside out.
That's right. Inside Out. Yes. Well, people have wondered about that. I think a lot of fans have assumed that the film Inside Out was sort of born at Cranium Command, but I've heard different sort of arguments, and there's even been people that have approached Disney, like knocked on their door to go, oh, Inside Out copied my treatment or whatever, and they would talk about, because Pete Docter and Pixar copied me, I'm owed something. And so a few people that were involved with that knocked on my door and went, didn't you guys, you predated all of that? Wasn't Pete part of that? And it's like, yes, he was. Pete Docter was an animator on the pre-show for Cranium Command. And it predated all of that stuff that people are trying to bring to, to say, hey, you guys copied us. It's like, no, it's like it was born in Cranium Command. I think more recently he's acknowledging that. At the beginning, it's like Tom Fitzgerald and I talked, and Tom was like, Pete, why aren't you going out there and telling the story of like, I was an animator on the pre-show of Cranium Command and look what it grew up into? Because I love what he did with the film. Oh my God, it's such a good film. And it grew eons beyond what we did there. But it's undoubtedly the seeds were in that show. And he went, that's a cool story to tell. But that wasn't part of how the show opened. But later, as other people started to knock on the door and go, hey, I think maybe Inside Out copied me. Now he's like, no, it's like we all took the seed was planted in Cranium Command, and like all of us sort of stampeded forward with different variations, including like, what was it, Herman's Head, and there were all this TV show, there were different things.
Herman's Head, you had, what was the one at Disneyland? Didn't Disneyland have an attraction that was not similar, but was, I might have to cut this out.
You're confusing it with Body Wars and Adventures Through Inner Space.
Adventures. Yeah. Okay, never mind.
But actually looking out through the eyes and making decisions and arguments inside the body and everything was undoubtedly where all of that was born. And I've seen some really clever little logos that fans have made where they have taken the Cranium Command logo and the Inside Out logo and
like
sort of combined them to be like a mashup, it's I went, okay, the people that are the deep fans, they know. And but I celebrate both things. I celebrate Pete being part of our team for the pre-show, and I celebrate in a big way where that film took the potentials of all of that. It was huge. And something I had happened to me is I did a show. This is just a little sidebar thing. I did a presentation for a show about imagination, and that's a pretty tall order where you have the Imagineers presenting a breakdown of what imagination even is and where it belongs in the world. So I did tackle that. I put a presentation together. I got to present it to Sir Ken Robinson, who I adore his TED Talks over the years. And so it was a really positive experience. But I had to present just after someone else, and there was my presentation to the Disney team came up right after somebody had put on a big all the bells and whistles show that was very slick, and I thought, well, mine is much more homegrown, and I have my simple sketches and stuff that are not finished and polished by a team. It was just me working alone doing the thing. But when the last person had put up something about, and it was about paint, and it was about colors, the use of colors in the world. And they had tied it to a specific paint company. And so I was so pleased that after that person had presented, and I'm biting my nails going, God, did they put on a slick show? The note that came back was, there's this tendency to cater to an investor like that. He said, I don't want to, we shouldn't be in that business. We shouldn't be in the business of catering to somebody that's coming to us with money we should be making something that is truly entertaining and then have people knock on our door. We want a paint company to knock on our door because they go, oh my God, that thing you did about color was so amazing. Right. I must jump on board. So they said, please go back. Lots of great energy went into it. Do it so that I have no idea what company, if any, might be involved at all. Just make me think about color, and then let's see what you do. So then I presented mine, which was, much more homegrown. In that same meeting, the executive just went, okay, this is what I'm talking about. This is just diving into the whole concept. It made us feel magic and wonder, and frankly, to do the full out magical version would be really expensive. So we have to take a look at, we shouldn't do this until we can afford to do it right, because there's no reason to do something that doesn't have the magic we felt today. It's like we should do full magic or not do it. And congratulations for not making us think about a company when you did it. So, I must say, last thing, I was so excited that David Newman did our score for Cranium Command.
Yeah.
And so, he did the score for The Brave Little Toaster, and he did Back to Neverland with me, and did this. And so we wound up doing like seven scores together.
That was early-ish in his career, is that?
It was pretty early, yeah. The Brave Little Toaster was the first big feature that he had done solo. And I just actually last night did a Zoom with him. We were being interviewed for the Spark Animation Festival up in Canada. They're celebrating the Brave Little Toaster's anniversary, and so we were talking about that score and it being his first big feature. But it was not long after that we did Cranium Command together. That was 85, 86 we were making it, so it's 86, 87 right in there when he did it, and then this was just 2 years later. Yeah.
Wow. And what an amazing career he's had since then. That was, oh gosh.
It's funny because I'd talked to somebody else about it and said, oh, it'd be great to use David Newman. They said, oh, no, he'd never do stuff in the park. And went, he already did. He did Back to Neverland. He did Cranium Command. They're like, what? And he said, yeah, you've got this renowned composer in the park. You didn't know that. So.
That's so funny. Well, then I will wrap up by saying thank you, Jerry, for all of your time tonight, your stories. You know what? I should have mentioned that you wrote the show too. It's like you didn't just direct it. It's like you wrote it, you put your heart and soul in it, and it really, I think, showed for all of us who saw it. And I think it really, there were people that are humongous fans of it now who never saw it. They've only seen it through videotape and never got to experience it in real life. And it's a testament to the work that you did.
I really appreciate that. And, with those things where they come to you with something, and it's happened a few times where they say, could you please start over and do something else with this? And like, what would you do? And it's equally exciting and intimidating because to be sort of asked to be the buzzer beater with something and sort of start over and try to hit a higher mark than might have happened is you never know if it's going to happen. It's like all you can do is try, and it's equally sort of it's flattering and intimidating to be handed that situation where you're like, well, I'm glad they trust me, but oh my God, I have to pull it off now. It's like you have to really make it work. So, collecting a core team together and being able to really start over and go, I pitched the new vibe, I pitched the new approaches to like different things we're going to change, but now to really make it come alive, it's just every day you're getting in and working with your little team to be as creative as possible. And so I was so glad that it came together and that I got to work with such a crack team.
Yeah, and it's still popular today. It's been, it's an open in 89. I'm terrible at math.
I was so happy to meet people when I came to the event with you in Florida. That, I think it was the last thing out of 3 that we mentioned on stage. And there was suddenly this applause in the audience, and I couldn't quite see because of the lights, but there was quite an outburst of applause. And then later, when those people came over to talk to me, they were young people in their like 20s or teens.
Both, yeah.
And we're definitely really into the show, and it was just a treat talking with them.
Yeah. Oh, do you have any projects that you want to pitch, or not pitch or promote while we have you here? I know you wrote the introduction of a book that's coming out, which we failed to mention when we were at Retro Magic. So I want to give you the opportunity to tell everybody about that.
There is. I'm gonna let the official announcement carry it, but we'll say as a teaser that yes, I did co-author a book with Keith Gluck, and we are going to announce it. It's Old Mill Press. Dave Bossert's group, who does high quality. They only do a few things and do them of extremely high quality. Is going to be our publisher, but we'll have a bigger announcement and all of that stuff coming out soon. But we just within the last week did our final hand-in of all the materials to the publisher. So excellent. It's now going through the official process of getting turned into the book.
Okay.
So next year. We may announce it before this year is out, but next year the book will be available.
All right, so we have something to look forward to.
Yeah, yes, you'll be able to sign it at the next event.
Yeah, and it does have to do with Disney. I will give that away.
All right,
perfect.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Jerry, for your time and your energy and your passion for your work and everything. It's been a treat.
Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate it, Jerry. And yeah, without your vision, the way you saw it, I don't think we would be talking about Cranium Command today. You rescued it and you turned it into something that we all cherish and love. So.
Well, we'd be talking about it. We just wouldn't be talking about it flatteringly.
Yes, that's right.
We would have lasted 3 months.
Yeah. Did you know that closed right after the Epcot Circus opened?
Yeah.
That's right. Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jerry. We'll be in touch. Thank you very much for joining us.
Follow the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society on Twitter and Instagram at LBV History and on the web at lbvhistory.org. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at retrowdw.com and on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at RetroWDW. And follow our hosts, Todd McCartney, on Twitter at WDWMS, Hal Bowers on Twitter and Instagram at GoAwayGreen, JT Cougar on Twitter at LS1JT and on YouTube at Rubber City Motoring and on the web at rubbercitymotoring.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Brian P. Miles. Retro Disney World is the monthly podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society, a nonpartisan, nonprofit, tax-exempt 501c3 organization and is not affiliated in any way with the Walt Disney Corporation or any of its subsidiary or affiliated entities.